Good morning. I think we want to start. Welcome to the second day of our symposium. So we have now the third round with the title Protest and Civic Engagement. I think the idea behind this title is obvious. The whole activity of the project and the book we are discussing is in a way also kind of activism and engagement, I would say, because all the people contributing to it are not just interested in scientific research, but to have an impact in society and to fight for better understanding and appreciation of the architectural production of the period and the ideas behind it. And George and I thought it would be good to make a round to further discuss that, to go further than what was possible in the book. So we have now two contributors from the book itself, but we have luckily also a lot of other speakers from different places who engaged in different contexts. And so my pleasure is to welcome as the first speakers Dima Al-Ghunaim and Sarah Al-Fry from Kuwait. So they are both founded the Madena in 2014, and I have to apologize for bad pronunciation. I think it's horrific, but I can't help. So I hope the message comes across anyhow. So they engaged in founding this group, which is an interdisciplinary social enterprise and agency for urban development using cultural tours and methods for research. And
Jill wants to say something. Sorry, but there's a technical problem. We could first do maybe Mona, Allah, that she can do presentation first.
Okay. Okay, we can do that. Okay, so we have a technical problem with our Kuwait speakers. So there is now the proposal that we change the sequence, which is fine for us, and have as the first speaker Mona El Halak from Beirut. She is an architect and heritage preservation activist and a graduate from American University of Beirut and the Syracuse University. And yeah, so I would just ask you to take the floor. Mona, can you?
Yes. Hello, thank you for having me. And I'm happy to be here and share the story of the Barakat building fight that I've led for the past 27 years. I'm going to share my screen.
Yes, please do so.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so this is Beirut, and I'm going to tell you the story of this yellow triangle, which is a rectangle, which is actually the Barakat building situated in the south area of Beirut. This is Beirut right after the center, downtown Beirut, the center of downtown Beirut, right after the civil war in 1990. And this is the same view in 1994 after the Solidar reconstruction project started and actually demolished 90% of downtown for a real estate project that took over the whole city for a private company. This is the day I started my story with the Barakat building. I decided to walk the Green Line. And the Green Line is the demarcation line that separated East Beirut from West Beirut for 15 years and actually became a green line because it was a no man's land and the trees grew in the middle of it. So I just wanted to be in front of the devastation of downtown Beirut. I wanted to see what is left of the city. And I reached this beautiful intersection where this amazing building was equally destroyed by the war, but it had this amazing presence commanding the corner, having this avant-garde architecture. And it was the first time I've ever seen it. It was on Damascus Road, the first carriageway that actually led from Damascus to downtown, to the walled city of Beirut in the Ottoman Empire. You could feel how commanding it is at the corner. Above the main door, the date of construction was in stone, 1924. So I started looking around for information about this building, because it was really captivating for me as an architect to see its architecture. It was built by Yusuf Bek Aftimos, and pioneer architect who in the last half of the 19th century was trained in New York and then in Europe. So when he came back to Beirut, he had these beautiful buildings that combined Ottoman and Western influences. Many of the 3 of them remain in Beirut along with the Barakat building. So it was already important to keep that building because of the architecture of the pioneer architect that built it. And if you can see that the building was built first in 1924, only the ground and first floor were built. And then they wanted a service staircase. So they asked a young architect who was fascinated by concrete, which was the new material at the time, to build a service staircase in the garden. And that was the staircase he built. His name was Fouad Khuzah. He was 19 years old, fascinated by a new construction material that was concrete. And he came up with this beautiful structure. So when in 1932, they wanted to continue the building, actually, Yusuf Aftimos, who was a great architect and in his 70s, decided to allow Fouad Khuzah to continue building, which came to be an amazing intervention, because what he did is the building didn't have this colonnade. So using concrete, he decided to connect the eastern and western part of the building using this concrete colonnade, using the properties of concrete, having what he really did and was avant-garde is the way he connected the 2 parts of the building, having this flying beam and having this flying fake actually balustrade to give the impression that the building is connected, but actually there's a void in between where you can see actually the sky. And when you enter the building, this is the space that you see. This is the spatial feeling. Other than the beautiful way this void lets in the light into the building, the void allows a remarkable architectural transparency that is unequaled in any other building in the city. From any room in this building, even if you are at the far back, you can actually have a visual access towards the city in many beautiful ways. And this is how as you move through the building, you can actually have these amazing transparent visual axes into the building. So this was for me a very captivating structure, and I wanted it became my little secret in the city, and I started taking people and showing it to them. Just a little detail, for example, on how the use of concrete was cleverly done by Fouad Khuzah. Of course, he did molds for all the decorative capitals and cornices, but also he duplicated what Aftimos had done in engraved stone into a concrete mold, and he painted it yellow, and no one would know that there's these 2 materials have been used in this building. So the building documents the transition between load-bearing stone walls and concrete construction in the early 20s and 30s. Art Deco tiles, optical designs, Art Deco motifs of the flooring, of the windows, they all remain despite the fact that the building was damaged by the war. I had the privilege to track down Mr. Fouad Khuzah, the second architect, and to interview him about how important this building was. And to him, that staircase, the service staircase he did, was the beginning of his career, and he really valued it highly. The Barakats lived in this building, which had this beautiful strategic location very happily until the 1975. This building is a very complex one because it documents the history of Beirut before the war through this avant-garde architecture, but also during the war because it was on the Green Line that we talked about. And you can see that it had an amazing, due to its transparency, it could command the Green Line in a very strategic way. So the fighters could hide actually in the furthest room to the back, and actually still have a shooting line, a visual access towards the city. So the architecture itself helped the building become a better killing machine. And you can see the ficus tree that really overgrew because of the Green Line. It's the only remaining tree of the Green Line. Inside the building, the snipers and the fighters built their own defensive architecture. So they have these 2-meter thick walls filled with sand, with wooden boxes that would serve as shooting boxes that still remain today as a memory to the war. You can see the building. It was one of the major intersections where you can see sand dunes that people couldn't cross from one side to another, and mainly many people were shot from that building. The building is scarred in every wall, in every centimeter of it. You can see the remaining structures that the militiamen have left. And you can see how they actually adapted almost adapted the Art Deco details to fit in their meurtrières or their killing boxes. They even used the doors of the building to cast concrete, which became a fair-faced concrete structure to help to protect themselves during the war. Graffiti of the war showing names of the people who were there. And the residential interiors that testify to the beautiful life that was there before. I just will run very quickly on, because the building has also, other than itself being an archive, it also has archives that was left in it. There was a dentist who lived on the first floor who practically left everything before he left the building. And you can leave his dentist chair, the books that he had typed, he practiced out of his apartment, so all his dentist equipment was still there. His letters, personal letters that actually tell the story of the city before the war, every single bottle he's ever drunk. He used to go to the cinema. So he left us this amazing, between debris, all these cinema brochures that actually together reconstruct the history and the socioeconomic history of downtown Beirut in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. An invaluable archive of newspapers that he kept and of visiting cards of all the important people from presidents of the republic to prime ministers to all the people that he actually knew. The second archive was in a small photography shop that was on the ground floor. That was the only other place where things were still there. And it was called Photomario. And I found hundreds of, thousands actually of...
Mona, sorry, yes. Just shortly to interrupt you. It's a fantastic story, but we have limited time. And it would be good if you know, say a few words how you engaged in preserving the building.
Sure, sure. So in 1997, a demolition permit was issued and the building was starting to be demolished. They removed all the tiles, they removed all the windows and the stone to be sold by the kilogram, because that was the tradition. So I started a preservation campaign, went to every newspaper in town, and for 3 years I had shown this building to so many people who started to engage to lobby with me to save the building. So during 5 days, the demolition stopped because the Minister of Culture took our side, but nothing. There was no law, no heritage law to preserve the building, so we had to continue lobbying. And that was at that time there was no social media, nothing. So and the internet was at its beginning. So I placed this banner and I asked people to come every weekend to tour the building with me. And I had hundreds of tours for 6 years, telling students, university students, school students, and professionals, anybody who was interested, to send us supportive email to actually preserve the building. The building was being visited all the time, and the petitions were being signed, but the owners of the building didn't stop trying to revoke the demolition, to restart the demolition and revoke the preservation. In 2003, we reached a solution to have an expropriation decree, and the building was expropriated to become the Museum of Memory of the city of Beirut by the municipality. However, it was just a decree and it was not acted upon by the municipality for 5 years. So the campaign continued. I had several exhibitions where I exhibited everything from the building and told about its architectural history and its importance in the city as a document, as an important testimony to our heritage. And then in 2008, the expropriation was completed after all this pressure, and I started forming a scientific committee, and Dr. George Arbid was one of the people who were on the committee to be able to support the municipality in its efforts to restore the building. And the municipality of Paris wanted to engage in supporting us technically in the project. In 2012, the rehabilitation work started with Youssef Haidar on board as an architect. Unfortunately, Youssef had designed this addition to the building and had a very brutal and intrusive concept to restore the building. Because we didn't have, we had only a consultative role as a scientific committee. We could give our opinion, but we couldn't stop most of the things that we didn't want him to do. So for example, you can see the prostheses that were added to consolidate the building. The way that the facade was treated had lots of controversy because he actually recreated bullet holes. He used some kind of a decorative stainless steel shingles to show the voids. And the most important thing that he did that was destructive to the building is the removal of the staircase of Fouad Qazah and the addition of this ramp, which was actually not functional at all, and the addition of what he wanted to be photovoltaic panels, which didn't work, and actually they were replaced with pure glass so that he doesn't change his scheme. This is one of the main challenges that we faced in this project, is that we didn't have a receptive municipal council. We didn't have an experienced people in heritage preservation or in cultural projects in the municipality. And we really were fighting like Boy Scouts, trying to stop whatever we can before the building loses its authentic feel as a heritage building from the 1920s and 30s. The second challenge was that we didn't have a heritage law and to protect it. So even after it was expropriated, there were no conditions, regular conditions that were imposed on the architect. And the third challenge was that the lack of a cultural director and or programmer who didn't come along with the architect so that the building becomes a museum in parallel with its restoration. So now, fortunately, despite the fact that the building is attracting everyone who comes to the city, from mayors to artists, but it didn't materialize to become the museum it should become because of the lack of funding, because of the lack of vision on part of the municipality. And unfortunately, since 2019, the city has been passing through multiple crises, starting with the revolution, the pandemic, and the economic fall down, that it's not a priority today. We still hope that this building will become the museum that it was envisioned to be. It is a beautiful testimony to the genius of Youssef Aftimus and Fouad Qazah, and the way these two people combined their architectural knowledge to produce this piece of architecture. But at the same time, we now want a cultural director to take over this building and actually transform it to the museum it should be. I just wanted to.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Go ahead.
No, it's a great story, great engagement, but we have to move on. We get back to you. We have time for discussion. So Janset will introduce our next speakers, and please keep in the time that we have some time left for discussion. We have, I don't know, 7 to 10.
So we go with Dima and Pelin, or yeah. Okay, so we go next to Dima Yasser and Pelin Tan. Dima Yasser is the director of the design program at the Faculty of Art and also lecturer at the Department of Architecture at the Birzeit University. She's also a Fulbright scholar and is interested in research on urbanism, architectural theory, and design. She has wide national and regional experience in architectural and urban design, as well as community development. Pelin Tan is a Turkish sociologist, art historian, and professor at the Fine Arts Academy at Batman University in Turkey. She is a senior lecturer at the Center of Arts, Design, and Social Research in Boston, and a researcher at the architectural faculty of Thessaly University, Volos. She is the 6th recipient of the Keith Haring Fellowship in Art and Activism, and so forth and so on, a very illustrious CV. So Dima and Pelin will be telling us about the activism for preservation in their experience. Thank you.
Can you please share the screen for the presentation?
Thank you very much. I would like to thank to George and Philip inviting us. And I would like to thank to Dima, because when I was researching Musa Alami farm, as Susanna said yesterday, by coincidence, walking in Jericho and coming across to the farm, I was searching who else is working on the farm. And I want to say with Susanna, we met 22 years ago in Istanbul. We worked together and we lost each other and we found each other through Musa Alami farm. So it's this farm is very important, is very personal and emotional for us. And I was searching for Dima. I couldn't reach her. And then at the end with this project, Philip and George introduced me Dima. So at the end we reunited and worked on the during COVID on the space. So little bit Susanna yesterday informed about Musa Alami. We want to also show and start a little bit about what we think about heritage and activism. I mean, there's two topics here, I think. Activism and solidarity practices has been discussed a lot in the last years. It's become very important under war condition, under COVID. But of course, in West Bank, in the occupied territories of Palestine, it is one of the most important communal practice for a long time. So solidarity and activism and heritage is for us, we were discussing a lot with Dima. Heritage is by concept is a colonial, already a colonial concept, is a colonial term. And how we can think of heritage as the architects Alessandro Petti and Sandy Hilal from Decolonizing Architecture from Bethlehem, how they are defining heritage as a what is stateless heritage? I mean, what is heritage when the state and the conditional state doesn't exist? When there's an ongoing colonize and oppression, and heritage becomes a kind of documenting the archiving of everyday life struggles and resistance. This is how we are looking. We have like 4 things to discuss here. How we can think. I mean, it relates with the archival question yesterday panel, re-questioning Palestinian heritage that goes beyond colonizer and colonized dualistic structure. I mean, it's difficult to go beyond that if you are living in West Bank, but or in Gaza. But how we can think heritage beyond this dualistic structure, and how we can see through that perspective archiving practice, putting the new terms, collectivity and self-initiate, self-organized collective. There are many initiatives in West Bank right now, self-organized collectives, artists and architects who are really trying to do alternative archiving practices and also different kind of activism. One, we can start with the same question that we are referring, that frames our presentation of Alessandro and Sandy. What is heritage? How we can questioning the term of heritage in a colonial land? How social spatial environment is connected to recreating the narrative of heritage. And refugee heritage that they came up with this project, they propose Daishe refugee camp, which is situated in Bethlehem, which is one of the oldest Palestinian refugee camp from 1948 after Nakba. They proposed to UNESCO. The architects think that refugee camps are a heritage of Palestinian society. It is, it should be protected. UNESCO should define as a protection. Of course, this will not happen. They applied officially to UNESCO, but here is that the architects are providing a kind of a provocative application that what is heritage, what should be preserved of Palestine. We can also expand in our own culture the same question. But here, Daishe refugee camp, which is a very important symbolic camp in Palestinian resistance, how permanency of temporariness can be preserved. This is the question. You see in the picture, concrete tent that they built with the Palestinian second and third generation in the camp. You see us, we are in the Haldun together. We are Katya here with our student in 2015, joined by David Harvey. We are together here really opening the concrete tent in Daishe camp, front of Edward Said Library. And it was a very important moment for us in 2015 that we discussed what is autonomous infrastructure and what is heritage. You can go to refugeeheritage.org. It's often been banned. Who knows who bans? I don't want to say anything. Maybe this project could be interesting that Dima can continue.
And as we're talking about, the archiving and, the whole idea of who owns the narrative now in Palestine, it's quite different. But after the establishment of the Palestinian Museum, it was inaugurated a few years ago without an exhibition, without any collection, because we don't have an archive. That was the thing. And it was mocked in the Israeli Haaretz and even the left newspapers and stuff. And a friend of mine, he's currently working, Amir Shomari, he's the director of the Wanted 18, and now working on this heist, sort of archival heist. It's a theft of fire, and he takes back, this whole idea of what would it be like to really take back this heritage that was once looted, under the protection of Moshe Dayan, and he plundered all the historical sites, and he took all these findings, and they became part of his collection, which were later on sold to the Israeli Museum for $1 million to become part of this thing. So this is one of the activists' projects that we're talking about. And also we have Dima Struji, who also had a documentary on Sebastia, also talking about this looting of the heritage and all the archives. And also Moshe Dayan appears in one of these images.
Yeah. I think that these projects are very important as form of activism for us. Like Dima, architect based in Bethlehem, she worked a lot on the archival images and trying to create through film, through medium, a different multiple images, archival images of how Sebastia is reclaimed is a Roman archaeological site near Nablus. Another project going on curated by Yazid Anani. I'm also part of this project. What we are doing, Zivi Efrat wrote a book using many archival sources, the object of Zionism, the architecture of Israel, and we are intervening to each chapter with some Palestinian heritage. The interesting thing is that these are the most archive that Palestinian cannot reach, actually, and it's part of modern architecture heritage archive of Palestine. So it's an interesting project that, of course, Zivi is also informed about this project. And Yazid, the curator, urbanist from Ramallah, also curated, yesterday Susanna mentioned a project on Jericho that Susanna worked on Musa Alami farm. She did one performance with many people, walking performance and bodily, a kind of a temporary performance in Musa Alami in Jericho. And also she dig, as she said yesterday, she dig into archives and really presented in different way, questioning the nation state and the relevance of Musa Alami farm. We will come back to that.
Yes, we're mentioning here just a few projects, whether led by big curators or even like individuals. Another interesting project was Saqiya, started by Sahar and Nida Sunuqrot. It's more of a progressive academy of experimental knowledge production, and here we're talking more about those initiatives that started about alternative knowledge production modes, and this goes back to contemporary practices along with indigenous local know-how.
Yes, for example, like Vivienne Sansur in Batir village near Bethlehem. I mean, Saqiya is near Ramallah and in another village, and she started Palestinian Heirloom Seed Library. And I should mention also geographer Omer Testel, who is doing with his collective alternative heritage of agroecology of Palestine. If you're interested, I have the link that you can reach. And also maybe it's very important, Munir Faseh, who is a very important pedagogue, alternative pedagogue, that is very referring to Sakagini also, his practice, and he has this Mujawara collective practice that he's doing a lot of gathering. Radio Al-Hara, run by architects Elias and Yusuf Anastas, artist Yazan Khalili, designers from Amman, Motana Hussein and Said Abu Jaber. This radio started also during COVID, but it gained a lot of attention. I have also a radio program there that I'm interviewing architects and designers about decolonial practices. But this brought us together from it's not only about international and global voice, but is about also how the region connects differently. Amman, Beirut, Cairo, Istanbul, Mardin, so different kind of cities connecting not through only music, but different kind of activism and petition and interviews and so on.
And it's very important to mention here the work of Riwaq, but we won't be talking much about it because Khaldoun will be mentioning.
Yes, Khaldoun will talk about it
elaborately. But yes, it's very important to note their work. And we believe, Pauline and I, as we started researching Musa Al-Alami, that Musa himself was an activist in whatever he proposed. This is the location of Al-Alami farm. It was at the time in the middle of nowhere because, the land was barren and it was called Mawat, according to the Ottoman classification. And he actually was, he had a plan for the indigenizing of these and modernizing the Palestinian Fallahin, the villages, the peasants there. And he was well aware of what was happening of, the Jewish National Funds for Jews to buy land in Palestine. And then he was well aware that we cannot really compare on that level. So we have to, root people in their villages by providing new infrastructure, modern life, making their lives easier because, it was really hard. As we look at these images of, his scheme, this was his dream, but then faced with the Nakba in 1948, he had to reinvent this, we're almost done. He had to reinvent this whole idea of the Arab Development Society, and he had to immediately respond to the crisis. source of, the refugees. It was destroyed 2 times. The first time it was destroyed in 1955 because of the Baghdad Pact, and a lot of the Palestinians went down to the site. They destroyed it. They stole some. They actually destroyed some of the documents there. And in 1967, it was completely run over by the Israeli forces when they took over that place. So.
Yes, we ending our presentation. We think that Musa Alami farm is very, if you go there, is a frozen, anachronic, modern settlement, building settlement that needs to be reactivated. And we believe that this heritage could be really activated for future in a different kind of usages. We can say more, but in the question and answer, I think we can talk more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we move to a case from Kuwait, which is the case of Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Kuwait City. And we welcome Dima Al-Ghnaim and Sarah Al-Freh, if I'm pronouncing correctly. Dima is an architect and is educated in Kuwait. She co-curated an exhibition called Kathra, Kuwait's participation in Venice Architectural Biennale under the theme of Common Grounds. And her interest in local culture and urban planning drove her to co-found Medina in 2014. Medina is an interdisciplinary social enterprise and agency for urban development using cultural tours as a method for research and local knowledge production. Sarah Al-Freh is also a Kuwaiti architect, educated in the Bartlett School of Architecture. She was a member of the teaching faculty at the College of Architecture of Kuwait University, and she also co-founded Medina with Dima for research about the Kuwaiti city or Kuwaiti urban environment. So please allow me to welcome them, and please go ahead.
Thank you for having us. Allow me to share my screen. Thank you for inviting us to speak at this enriching symposium. In this presentation, we would like to give an overview of the landscape of urban activism in Kuwait and the different forms of protest associated with it. For a country that had gained independence in the 1960s, protests were crucial to maintain freedom of speech, monitor governmental performance, gain civil rights, and to defend one's own country. The general format of protest did not change much over the years, and the topics of protest remained focused within the political sphere, targeting constitutional rights. However, protesting remained a difficult act up until 2011, when a series of rallies and marches followed immediately after the outbreak of the Arab Spring. These protests raised questions about the use of public space and the rules and regulations associated with it. This is when political and urban activism started to overlap. Urban activism in Kuwait stems from a history of demolition and displacement associated with its realization as a modern and independent country. The discovery of oil marked a geo-economic shift from the old trade route, connecting Kuwait to Yemen, East Africa, and India, to a country claiming its position in the Arab League and inviting Arab experts in all sectors to contribute to Kuwait's new vision of modernity. In this slide, you can notice that shift in the way Kuwait was represented in postcards. The upper half reflects an Orientalist view, while the lower rows colorfully showcasing a modern Kuwait that is still carrying a distant and staged message that despite our move towards modernity, we are still holding on to our tradition. On the local level, the geopolitical contract with the British government had also turned into a geo-economic contract, as the British firm Minoprio Spenceley and Macfarlane were commissioned in 1951 to create the first master plan of Kuwait. The plan was to turn the old town into a new business district and redistribute wealth through the process of land appraisal and acquisition of the houses in the old town. Citizens were offered a new way of living, complete with modern homes and the latest amenities within 8 suburban districts outside the city walls. This urban renewal plan, while it served the citizens with the essential modern needs, had indirectly created a collective urban trauma as manifested in the cultural production of that time. Resistance was channeled through literary and artistic expressions. While some poets expressed their sorrows over the mass demolition of their mud brick houses, others revolted over the governmental programs made to organize that massive urban project. Sun has shined over the lantern's light. Even trust had shut its mouth. A detection committee they have assigned. It will do justice, they say, to the public and the private alike. We have swallowed the bait, it seems, and there is no going back. Under scrutiny should this committee be. There was a common association between the destruction of the old town and Al-Haddama, a year of heavy rainfall that hit Kuwait in 1934 and destroyed 1/3 of the houses in the old town. O rain, fall and fall, our house is new, our drain is made of iron. A folklore song performed cheerfully in a national operetta and grimly in a theatrical prologue to an act entitled Haddama. The act talks about a man refusing to sell his old house to his rich brother, knowing he will demolish it and build a multi-story building in its place. These expressions of childhood memories and recollections of hardship were blueprints of nostalgia, delivering to new generations the sentiment of belonging to an unseen past. Kuwait Urbanization, written by Saba Shibr and published by the State of Kuwait, was also a personal critical account of the building process of the modern city and the doubts he had about it. The Gulf War in 1990 resulted in new realizations at the urban level. These are of citizenship, national borders, and the importance of documentation. Documentation of borders and civilians' right to their land became an urgent form of resistance. And while satellite imaging was actively utilized to rebuild the country after the destruction caused by war, the record of human experience during war that was collected right after the invasion was never followed by any social action plan. The aftermath of social trauma was once again neglected and overshadowed by urban renewal. The inauguration of the College of Architecture in Kuwait University in 2010 had a great impact in building an active urban community, addressing and documenting issues related to the city and modern culture. City-based curriculums encourage students to take an active role in understanding the city and consider the existing urban fabric as contextual architectural precedents. And with the rise of entrepreneurial spirit in the local youth, the city offered an affordable alternative to what malls had to offer. The city became, or failed to offer, the city became once again accessible. In 2012, a community of architects made their first organized collaborative effort to represent Kuwait in the Venice Architecture Biennale, responding to the theme Common Grounds. The team created an audible record of local gatherings displayed in the exhibition over a ground of urban archives. The exhibition voiced the urgent need to provide access to information as a first step towards finding common grounds. It also brought together under one umbrella young architects who were working at different governmental and private sectors. The culmination of these efforts to build an urban community manifested itself at the first public protest against the demolition of the Chamber of Commerce, which took place on the 7th of April, 2014. A building designed by the Lebanese firm Dar al Handasa and completed in 1966. Despite its viable conditions, the building was later abandoned in 1999 with the building of the chamber's new
Dima,
headquarters.
Sorry for interrupting, yes. But if you could take 2 minutes to wrap up.
Yes, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Elsewhere. The demolition quickly came to I'll give the grounds to Sarah to continue. Yeah. You're muted.
Okay. The demolition came to our attention mainly because it stood outside the Qabliya School, a building which is home to the Architectural Conservation Department of the National Council for Culture. So Zahra Ali Baba, an architect and employee there, informed us of the demolition which had started on the upper floors. The ill fate of this building was inherently tied to the lack of communication between the entities involved and the proceedings of any action related to the buildings of historical importance. Proposals to renovate the chamber, it was soon discovered, were stopped by Kuwait municipality for reasons that remain unclear to us, forcing the owners to proceed with demolition plans, which in this case were speedily approved. We realized then that such a cause would not get the attention of the public unless it was covered by the media, and in doing so, we were able to also reach out to the larger architectural community in Kuwait. The demolition of this building made us question the fate of other buildings on the horizon. And as Dr. Farah al-Naqib, a historian, highlighted, that the importance of preserving buildings in clusters in order to preserve the urban experience is highly important, and the story of buildings become vague without context. And once again, the concept of al-Haddama, which we previously talked about, had come to resurface. The natural origin of demolition associated with this concept still remains uncertain. The aftermath of the protest became the basis for several trajectories. For example, Dima and I, we worked together as part of a team to establish Medina in the same year, a social enterprise devoted to highlighting the relationship between the city and its dwellers, to curated tours, collaborative programs with the vision to become mediators between public and private entities involved in the building of the city. With demolition continuing to happen, media coverage became more prominent in highlighting the public disapproval of the loss of modern heritage. Grassroots movements and place-making programs also started to emerge in public parks and residential areas, actively responding to decisions that disregard the human factor and the importance of public space. Social media activists started to be more responsive to urban change. Private buildings assigned for demolition started to open their doors and their properties for photographers for the purpose of documentation. The resistance to the demolition of Al Sawabar project, a housing project from the 1980s, had been one of the most elaborate urban acts. A dedicated Instagram account was made to monitor and share the process of land appraisal and demolition. Architects also started to volunteer and propose plans for preservation. However, sadly,
Sarah, if you excuse me, if you could take a moment to kind of go into the conclusions of this experience, but also if you could remove your hand from the microphone because it interferes with the please.
Sadly, the housing scheme was demolished in 2019, and an art exhibition was held to commemorate its existence. This is the ice skating ring, which was also demolished. We were unable to stop it, but this was the last skate where people rallied as a protest. Finally, the onset of COVID-19 with the social confinement of lockdowns can be viewed as another urban trauma. The 2 hours of daily exercise made people walk through the streets and connect with their neighborhoods in unprecedented ways. Therefore, the question that we have is, how do we create safe, inclusive spaces? And this is a question that began to resonate across many emerging platforms and programs dedicated to education and placemaking in Kuwait. Finally, the main and resonant aftermath of all urban activism in Kuwait, we feel, is how to address the people before the space and put the human experience at the forefront. Access to information is needed to understand cities, their past and present, but it is through empathy and access to people that we begin to activate the possibilities of the city's future. Thank you very much.
Okay, so do you want to raise hand in the audience? Yeah, okay, let you. Okay. Abdul, you want to say something?
We have a raised hand. I mean, now we can go into a brief discussion to sum up the three presentations. And we had a raised hand in the audience. So it's Aryan Shamoun, if I'm pronounced correctly. Would you like to speak? Maybe not.
So I would like to start with one question to you. I mean, the cases are quite different in their political and cultural context. And the two other cases, there was the meaning of using newspaper and public media as a way to create awareness was a major factor. In your cases, it looked a little bit different. I mean, there was, you didn't mention newspapers, you mentioned kind of a self-organized radio. So I was wondering, I mean, how you would say how your way of creating a public discourse and awareness is maybe different from the other two cases? And yeah, maybe you can say some.
You mean that is more social media is more used, digital media than?
No, I mean, I think in the case of Beirut and in the case of Kuwait, it's for me very similar also for what we know from Europe. So there seems to be two major forms to do that: is to have kind of get the press interested in and to get the press coverage, and the other is to have a gathering in the urban space and get people to the place.
But I think, Philip, not only in Palestine, I think we can talk in different places too. I think here is when in our cases, what we showed is bringing, I mean, creating collective communal practice. I mean, new coexistence of communities we are speaking, you know, is a kind of more, not an action, come this place, gather this place and do a protest. I mean, it's not about that. Of course, it is needed too. You know, we have in Beirut, in Istanbul, everywhere about saving and claiming public spaces. We have that, it's very common. But here is also creating, it's also about knowledge production. How the object of activism is not or focusing on saving one place or claiming one place in a temporary way, but creating a discursive platform and new communalities. Like we were showing examples like how Sakia is creating community. You know, it's not only those practices are not only criticizing colonial power or settler colonialism, also creating a criticism to Palestinian Authority, you know, like many critical positioning is being established. So here is, for me, and what we are thinking with Dima also, creating new collectives, new communalities. This is very important, and this needs processing. And this needs a different kind of, what we talked yesterday, different kind of archival practices, different kind of dissemination of knowledge, like here in radio program that architects are doing and discussing about architecture in a different way from the region. Yeah, I can think so more.
I think I can add on to that. In some of the instances, for instance, we've had the demolition of important cinemas that were established in the 50s. Some people did actually ask for permission to go, like spend, you know, to protest and do stuff, but it's not yet all brought together. I like the work of Riwaq also when they bring life to places that they work on, whether through art, music, exhibitions. And it's about creating these platforms, in connection with some of organizations, even institutions, Birzeit University, Riwaq, Qattan Foundation and stuff like that. So it's more on a cultural level. I haven't noticed anything in the newspaper, really, to say. I think it's all about, the political situation. What is a priority here? Whatever you read in the newspapers. And this also brings us to the concept of heritage. Like I myself didn't know much about Al-Alami until, a few years ago, because it's always, to the outskirts of the city. Even if you look at planning and even the planning schemes, like there's a gateway coming into Jericho. It's just the Alami farm is just outside. It's like in no man's land, sort of, to say, So these practices really tell you so much about, the role of whether we're talking about governments or even local newspapers, but also the role of institutions and the collectives and the individuals in initiating such activist moods.
Yeah, I'm sorry to kind of being kind of so drawn into this Palestinian case, but I have just to extend on that. In a sense, it reminds me, you might find it strange as a comparison when we work on shrinking cities in the way kind of in the US public protest works. Because when I was in Detroit, there was enormous issues and there was nothing like a kind of public debate in the media or demonstrations or whatever. It was more communal, as you say, communal neighborhood groups kind of trying to kind of build something up. And so for me, I don't know if also the political condition is more complex. So I think there is not kind of a clear point of accusation where you kind of address a certain owner or authority to be kind of responsible for a misbehavior or a misdecision, which is in the other case pretty clear. I think in the Beirut, okay, there is the owner, there is a municipality. In Kuwait, I assume it's mainly the planning authorities which are in charge of that. And I think the examples you showed about Alami Farm or about the refugee camp, it is not such a clear where you say, okay, here, this is a bad guy, he did the thing wrong and we attack him. It's more complicated, huh? What are the kind of our colleagues from Beirut and Kuwait see it in, if you compare these three cases, I mean, how you relate to one another?
Anything else? I think Philip is, yesterday we wanted to talk, but we couldn't talk with the, the relation about censorship and censor, especially in cultural scene. We have censorship, yeah, in Turkey too, and in other places. I know that this last year, a Palestinian DJ was arrested in Ramallah, for example. She was detained for a while and so on. So yes, maybe, I mean, it's not clear. I mean, there is no reactionary gesture here in those practices. It's more about preserving and recreating collective knowledge and using different kind of disseminative practices, and also like dealing with oppression and censorship, how to go beyond that, because it's also constraining. Just quick note about Musa Alami. We know that Musa Alami is ideologically he's a developmentist, rural, and he was believing into reconstructing and developing Palestinian rural life, and he was thinking that this is the Palestinian nation building. It's not that totally. We authors and researchers, we agree with that at that time, but his positioning against the Palestinian, also the other people around, other countries around, that makes, I think, maybe interesting to see how Musa Alami was maneuvering during the different years, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, yes. and how we can think. I mean, we're not saying that Musa Alami was an activist. I wouldn't say that, but how this, what he established, what he was his thinking. Brings this heritage now for us to rethink again. I want to, one sentence, Philip, maybe it's important that Mohammed and Amin, we can discuss later, but I think 1944, the Arab League meeting in Alexandria is very important, that Musa was a delegate representing Palestine, that the other Arab countries were not so sure, because they were saying that we are all representing Palestine, that we don't need Musa Alami to come. But then he was in the meeting and there was a lot of meeting, but shortly Musa Alami proposed two things. One is independent media in Palestine. This is what he said, not controlled by West, neither controlled by, this was one thing. And then the second, building Palestinian, this kind of pedagogical villages. This was a two thing. I find it important that his participation in Alexandria Protocol in 1944, in the Arab League, and his how contemporary was his two proposal that time,
Before we move on, I would like to pose a question to Mona, because I think if in the Palestinian case, there was very much the questioning of what we understand as heritage and culture. And so, for example, as was mentioned, kind of consider a refugee camp as kind of a very strong example of artifact and for the history of the people of Palestine. So in your case, I noticed also, if you showed in the presentation, I mean, basically you have, it has kind of two sides. The one thing, it is kind of an important piece of architecture, even so it's kind of interesting that it was not built in one run, but it was kind of extended and developed. So it's also in that sense already a little bit different than what we normally would consider as an important modern building. Normally it's like this kind of heroic thing which boom is there. But especially you kind of gave equal relevance to the fact, the meaning of the building and its redesign in the Civil War. So so for you, I think both dimensions are equally important. And so in that sense, you are already also challenging a certain understanding of built heritage and culture to include the second. And I noticed that in the one article, there was also a question, is this the way we should remember the Civil War? So maybe you can say something about, did you kind of face kind of issues by your way of understanding heritage? Was this already pushing a limit for the authorities or the public discourse?
Of course, thank you for the question. Of course, this was the main challenge. And I mean, it is a miracle in the real estate speculation and state of amnesia that we live in Beirut, especially after the war and after the demolition of downtown Beirut, that this building actually stayed. And it's more of a miracle that it was expropriated by the municipality of Beirut. And it's the only building in Beirut standing today that is a public building with traces of the Civil War. Our main challenge with the municipality was first, okay, we will keep the building, but do we have to keep the traces of the Civil War? But the building itself was, the most important thing is that it commemorated the passage in the city from the avant-garde architecture to the Civil War, and also the 23 years that took it to become a public building that is safe, commemorated or testify to the post-war demolition and erasure of memory that the city underwent. So yes, even that we were even discussing. We went to the discussion of, okay, we can keep some of the sniper nests on the first floor, but remove those on the ground so that it becomes more open to the public. And it was a big no. We keep everything because this is our last chance to actually see how this amazing architectural concept actually serviced serviced the war because of its transparency. So these overlays were really interesting, but I think we are suffering today. The building has not given the political will to become the museum of memory. It should be, because also it touches upon the civil war.
I would like to add something really back to Musa Alami and the whole activism thing. It's very interesting because he was, the representative figure at some point, but then after the establishment of, the Palestinian liberation movement, and things have shifted, even like the whole representation of Palestine, from the philanthropist Musa, who wears a suit all suited up with a tarbouch, and then to the new representation, the Fidai, and things shifted, and then things took a different turn with the arrival of the Palestinian National Authority. And then we can say that some people did actually villainize Musa for being a collaborator with getting all the funds from Ford Foundation and all the World Bank and stuff like that. So he was indeed a very controversial, and he had a lot of proposals, brochures going out to the Arab League to get money. The only people who gave him actually money were the Iraqis. They only committed to that. And then he had to seek funds from other places, which actually made him look like a villain in the 50s when they attacked the site, because he was, a collaborator sort of. So it's very important to also understand that the political conditions that emerged around him at that time.
Okay, thank you very much.
I want to add to Mona, to Beirut case, maybe George will also speak, or Mona, the Egg building by Philip Karam, how this building was used in the revolution in the Beirut as a place for assembly, that people were meeting and doing assemblies, Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I hope we can continue the discussion in the next segment. But now let's move on, and let's welcome Sami Al-Lulu, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who is representing, sorry?
Al-Lulu.
Al-Lulu, okay.
Yes.
Who's representing September, which is a Paris-based firm working with architectural urban strategies in an international working field with backgrounds from North Africa, Germany, and Scandinavia. Their projects are quite diverse. They examine new places and merge them with a given context. One of the latest projects is residential buildings in northern Paris, Belleville, which received a nomination to the EU Mies Award in 2017. And Sami will be telling us about the experience of the Hotel du Lac, which is an icon of brutalist architecture and threatened with demolition, and how civil society is taking action. Please go ahead. 8 to 10 minutes, please.
Yes, can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. As you said, we work we are Paris-based practice. We have different backgrounds, and the main important thing is the environment, the built and the unbuilt environment. So that we call le milieu. And le milieu is for us is finally at the end the question of identity. And speaking of identity, I don't know if many of you have been to Tunisia the past 30 years. And you would have been probably welcomed by this kind of postcards where you can see projection of Arab Islamic identity and Orientalism with the presence of the minaret, the mosque, the sandy beaches, the doors of the Medina. And this is an exotization of our identity that that have been projected by the Tunisian government for the past 30 years, and it was at the service of a tourist vision. But this vision, for us, tend to erase from our collective consciousness a large part of our heritage, another part of our heritage, which was super modern. And we started at the dawn of the independence of the country in 1956, where you can see like some of the examples here. For instance, the presidential summer palace from Olivier Clément Kacoub, Tunisian architect Olivier Clément Kacoub. And this is a very particular modernism, which mixed between modernity and handicraft, as you can see here. And also mixed between rationality and ornaments. like this example from Jacques Marmet for this high school. And it also played with different elements like the environment, the sun, the wind, as you can see here. And the government at that time wanted to project another image of Tunisia, which was more secular, let me say, and more heroic and modern. Maybe that image was going with the Tunisia wanted to be like a not aligned country, to project a post-colonial nation-state symbol. And one of the most important symbol of that was the Grand Hotel that Bourguiba wanted to build in Tunis. And at that time, he called for young architects, and among them was this young Italian architect called Raffaele Contigiani. And this building was such a symbol that it was figured in the postcards. And this is a postcard from the 60s. And you can see when we started to go towards the 90s, the postcards kind of changed, and we can still see the Hôtel du Lac, the Grand Hotel of Tunis here, but it was mixed with elements of the tradition. So you can see the woman dressed, the traditional woman dressed in satsari, a view from the old Medina of Tunis, the interior of the Grand Mosque of Tunis. So you can see that this image is a little bit moving from that heroic secular image to an international, actually, generic image to something like more linked to the tradition, the Arab Islamic identity. So what happened all this year? Let me make a brief history. So the hotel was wanted by the former president Habib Bourguiba. So he called for Raffaele Contigiani to build it in a very strategic location of Tunis. So between in this axis called Mohammed V axis, and the Avenue Bourguiba, which is the main avenue of Tunis. And you can see here the European district and the organic limits of the Medina of Tunis. And it was 10 minutes kind of stone's throw from the airport. So it was a very strategic location to make a grand hotel for businessmen and tourists who come to Tunis. And you can see here the erection of these symbols of modernity that Tunisia wanted to project at that time. You can see here on that image as well, a more newly image. And this young architect, Raffaele Contigiani, actually was not very famous, but he participated to the Zagreb Fair in Yugoslavia in 1954. And he experienced kind of a new shape of an inverted pyramid that he used in this in the design of the concept of the hotel. The hotel is about 1,500 square meters, 10 stories hotel with a panoramic restaurant at the last floor, and on the ground floor you have entrance and services, and of course all the rest you have the rooms. And the specificity of this hotel is that the basis is kind of thick and the core is very thin, and that has only 10 meters wide. And you can see all the rooms that are here and are organized with the corridor, which is here, the circulation. And you have the stairs in the corners. And what is very interesting with that shape is that all the elements are made with metal tie rods that bring all the forces to the concrete base, and there's a general raft that balance all the forces to go and reach the good ground, because we have a swamp ground here in Tunis. So it goes like very, very deep. And all of that is suspended kind of by a longitudinal gantry. It we always see this Hôtel du Lac as a symbol of brutalism, but the problem is that it doesn't use a lot of concrete. So it's kind of brutalism minus the concrete, because it's only made, not only, but most of it is made from steel, as you can see in that picture. and that steel is also used for the panels of the facade, and the glass is like there's a will to blur the scale of the facade, almost like another hotel that is not far from it. It's called Hotel International, where they use that technique to blur the scale of the facade, that make it look more monumental. The hotel has been owned by investor for a very long time, but in 2000 it has been abandoned and sold to a Libyan foreign investment called Lafico, who bought it just to demolish it, because they want to erase, they want to rise another type of hotel, like a bigger scale of hotels in that place. And until that, the hotel was abandoned there. So you can see the degradation of the facade, that the steel panels are falling down. The concrete is also degraded. Everything is abandoned in it. So the stairs are falling down in pieces. And like 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, we heard that some trucks were going there to demolish it, to start to demolish it. And we have to know that in Tunisia, even though we had of course the revolution and the fact that we have a freedom of speech, the rumor is still one of the most efficient newspaper in Tunis. And the rumor that we heard, it was that the hotel was soon demolished. So we started actually a kind of how to say, spontaneous campaign to reach media exposure from the social media, of course. It started with that, and we have like kind of 3 axes. So the first thing was to create a media hype around this hotel, for the foreign newspaper, for the local newspaper, to how to say, to be conscious about the demolition of this what we call a monument and a part of our heritage. The second thing that we did with the association Édifices et Mémoires, that Safé Cherif is also a part of it, and this panel was to make how to say, a procedure to classify this modern heritage as a Tunisian heritage, a patrimony that is very important. As for the Villa Kakoub in Sqanes al-Monastir, so we started to call for the municipality to stop to cancel the demolishing permit. This is what we succeeded to do. But I think we cannot save that building if we don't, how to say, make this building as an icon again. I think 30 years of high Orientalism, of high, how do you say, I mean, like the Tunisian government wanted to show a very Islamic Arab culture, and that's it. And they wanted to erase the colonial heritage. They wanted to erase the modern heritage, and all of that made very bad effects on the collective conscience. So one of the other axes is the public information, is to try to make this hotel back again in our conscience. And one of these, maybe it looks like superficial, but I think it's very important. It's make it an icon again. We can see here examples of what we wanted to create, and to create, for instance, earrings in the shape of the Hotel du Lac, and even the necklaces in the shape of Hotel du Lac. And the idea is to make it as a part of our culture, to make it hype again. And I think it's one of the most important strategies to save it, because we need to save it in our conscience first before trying to fight against the municipality and the lack of conscience about this very important heritage. I wanted to be quick. I hope I've been less than 10 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. And now we move on to Mohammed Gohar. He's with us. He will be talking about Alexandria and reading the city. He's an architect and a researcher. He works between Alexandria and Marseille as an independent cultural consultant and advisor. In 2013, he founded Description of Alexandria, which is a documentation project for the cultural heritage of the city, seeking to document its heritage and its architectural and cultural memories. Please go ahead, Mohammed.
Thank you for the invitation. I will, in these 10 minutes, I'll be talking about trying to give a glimpse about how the situation of Alexandria in the terms of social and architecture and heritage. And I will explain what I did in order to engage the civic society in a long process fight against, or not fight, or like a long process raising of the awareness of the city. When you try to search Alexandria, when you try to buy a book about Alexandria, you will always find it starting with Alexander the Great had started the city, built the city, I don't know, in this year. Alexander the Great did this and this and this. Every book starts with this. If you are more likely, you will find a book that talks more about Muhammad Ali, the viceroy of Alexandria in 1805. And this was almost 200 years ago. Then you come to Alexandria and then you face the reality. In this photo, it's 2014. You will see how the skyline of the city look like, and how on the lower image, you see how it should have looked like maybe 15 years earlier. This is due to several reasons. One of them is the way of the city of Alexandria is expressed in academic research, in media, in literature, in art production. It always shows this kind of images which is belong to a city that doesn't exist. What you see, maybe or maybe not, we can see reflections of the past of what we call a cosmopolitan era, but that has nothing to do with the reality now. All the academic production or science production about the heritage of the city, because we don't have a specific kind of architecture production talking about the city, and we have to differentiate between Alexandria and Cairo. It's totally different planning, different society, different way of presenting the city. So you will see the books that are supposed to talk about the heritage of the city dealing in this way, talking about the history of the building, what the building represents, who built the building, who lived the building, but at the end, that has nothing to do with the real user of the city of today. And to understand more how the society of Alexandria is divided, you have a group who belong to the era before the 1950s, who benefited from the Egypt when it was a royal country. And another group who are consuming the city from the 1950 till now, and recently, and they are on the other hand, and recently a group who were born maybe on the 2000, they are now around 20, 22 something, and they have their own city, and they neither belong to the city before the 50s nor the city after the 50s. And their voices are absent. In a general line of promoting, generalization of promoting the Alexandria, and after the Arab Spring, we have seen a rising process of nostalgia and vintage photos, which all has shaped the mentality of this new generation of how the city looks like. All this had led to a pre-structured image of Alexandria. And this, in my opinion, has stopped the production of the future. Now you can see the people in Alexandria are living in a city that they are consuming, but they are all looking to the past. The present and the future is absent. What I'm trying to do in my work is trying to study the city, but not from the past, but it's from the present by giving a new meaning, a new narrative to what we have inherited. One of the basis is to try to think critically about the past, what we call heritage. Because in some time when they were building Louis Sullivan, for example, in 1894, built the first skyscraper in Alexandria. We was building this kind of architecture. It was in 1927. We were building this kind of architecture, and this had led the image that architecture for an Alexandrian citizen, architecture should look like this. This is the good architecture, and that had impacted the perception of modern architecture in Alexandria. Because when I do a questionnaire, I talk to people, they see this kind of buildings, which we have a very few examples of this, which is the beginning for modernity. They see it's poor, ugly, dark, it doesn't have feelings. If you are more intellectual and you have some sort of reflection, you will say this is a fascist architecture. This is Villa Aguillon, was built by the French August Perret. Despite all the architectural values, it has no meaning to the Alexandrian citizen. Because partly is what I have mentioned before, is how we have been architecturally educated in Alexandria. So in my work, I'm trying to use what we have inherited, giving it a new narrative. And it should become in my upcoming book, maybe in 1 year. I'm talking about the third places in the city. Third place is mainly everything that it's not a work, neither a home. And it's different to how the French are describing the third place. So this is working more on the two theories of Kevin Lynch when he divided the city in the image of the city. You have the 5 elements. I'm working on the edge and the pulse, which is creating the user experience of the city. And then I'm linking it to the work of Henry Lefebvre, the French sociologist, where he is studying in a way called regressive progressive. He starts from the now and then going to the past. And this is exactly what I'm doing in my work. I work in the same places where we used to call cosmopolitan, but I'm studying it from the now. This is a square in Alexandria called the Place de Consul, and it's always the kind of knowledge production. It will be talking about the building you see in the background, who built it, who lived here, and all of this, and the value of its architecture. But no one are trying to describe how, or to analyze how is this building is reacting and is being used by the citizens of the city in the meantime. So what I'm trying to do is to peel back the city layers and analyze how the elements were built and how the modern gentrification has helped in shaping not just the architectural level, but also the urban level, and how the city is being consumed now. And this is working between architecture, urbanism, and humanities. It's an interdisciplinary study, but at the end, it gives an image of how the city is being consumed by the people now. There will be, it's a selection of, according to a map, of several entrances, of several facades. And so simply if we divide one building with one owner into several entities, like for example, under each building, we have several shops, several entrances, several parts that deal with several groups of people, of society. So if we divide each one into an owner of a shop, or a dealer with a shop, or a user of the shop, then you will have a different stories and a different narrative that deal with the different levels of the society. Each one has an importance in the daily life of someone, but yet we are not able to analyze it. We are not able to decipher it. We are not able to connect it to the daily life. But once they are put in a sequence and they are collected together, they can tell a story of a city, or as simple as a street, that is dealing with the people now. Then there are several samples from the same place. Then what I do later is to try to, this is still an academic production.
Mohammed, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you could wrap up in a minute or two.
Yeah, I am finishing. This is the last. I'm not explaining. So at the end, to make this accessible to people, this kind of academic production is simplified into an exhibition, talks, presentation that can be accessible to everyone in the society, so they can link the modern city to their connected with the history, to their daily image city, which can create a general voices if we want to engage the society not in a protest action, but in a long-term awareness that it can maybe in some year or some time or some years make a barrier against the, I won't say the demolition, but the change, the radical change of the image of the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, we have an interesting discussion on the chat, but we'll get back to that. And now we continue with Safa Sharif, who is a Tunisian architect with experience in national and international institutions. She's an active member in the association Edifice et Mémoire and is the coordinator of several projects of the association. She is also an elected member of the Municipal Council of GAFSA and the president of the Committee of International Cooperation. Safa will be telling us about the experience of Edifice et Mémoire. Please go ahead, Safa.
Thank you for the invitation first. And I'm very excited to speak about the experience of and the activism of the association Edifice et Mémoire. But I'm trying to share my screen.
Is there a problem? It's not working?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Allô?
Yeah,
Vous m'entendez?
We see it fine.
Yes, it's good.
I will begin by a small presentation of our Edifice et Mémoire NGO, which was created on 2014 by 5 friends who are architects. There are 12 active members, 16 members, 20,000 followers with a number of visits varying between 200 and 250 a day. We choose as logo the Hotel du Lac, one of the emblematic projects which deals the presentation of SEMI. Which is an emblematic project of the Brutalist architecture, and which was the subject of an awareness campaign to call for its preservation. It was the subject of a file of requests for its protection, supported by a petition signed by more than 2,000 citizens. In this event, which was organized with Goethe Institute Tunisia and the Gallery of Art Central Tunis. Until today, we have only contributed to the postponement of the demolition of this architecture shower. The fight continues. We choose from the beginning of the creation of our NGO to articulate our actions around 3 axes: identification and awareness via applications, website, media passages. The second. Excuse me, I have to
Fine, just go on explaining. We hear and see.
The battery is low.
Will you be able to connect the laptop to a charger?
The mouse is still moving in the presentation, but we don't see and hear you. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Now we hear you again. Okay, super.
The second act is about rehabilitation through pilot rehabilitation projects, and the third act is about legislative and participation in decision making and recognition of heritage. For the slide. Excuse me. So about identification with speed and awareness when patrimoine, which is mean where is heritage, is an action launched on social networks in the form of a Facebook group. Facebook group which with 100 of followers, carrying where internet users are invited to publish photos and endangered buildings that they have spotted themselves. It is to highlight to Tunisian architectural heritage, old and recent and endangered. Share and disseminate information as widely as possible with the aim of raising wide awareness. This action is especially for raising wide awareness and national awareness about the importance of the heritage, national heritage. From there from this action came the idea to centralize all these information collected on Facebook and can the project of the collaborative Heritage Observatory, which is a project carried by the NGO Édifices Mémoire, financed by UNESCO and supported scientifically by PL3C, which is a research unit of the School of Architecture and Urbanism of Tunis. It is the establishment of a network of 15 observers throughout the Tunisian territory, deployed in all regions during 2 months. The observers had the task of identifying and documenting various buildings related to all historical periods through which Tunisia has passed, including the contemporary era. This census was done according to predefined criteria that were communicated to the observers during a training session organized by Édifices Mémoire in collaboration with the research unit PL3C. This project is part of the will of Édifices Mémoire to identify the places and the buildings of Tunisian heritage as the knowledge of architecture heritage is a crucial step toward its enhancement and preservation. In this action, more than 530 sites have been identified during this campaign of 2 months. Let me explain quickly the process of this observatory, collaborative observatory of heritage. There is five steps to identify heritage buildings. First is a data collection. Second, the technical validation, which is ensured by a team whose mission is to facilitate the understanding of the elements collected by the team in charge of the scientific validation. The third step is the scientific validation, which is carried out by a team of experts whose mission is to verify the veracity of the information collected. They are in direct contact with the observers to carry out the necessary verification and request additional information. The fourth step is which called the final validation. To control is this step is so important to ensure the coherence of the publication, and the final step is the diffusion. These are the back office.
Safa, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you could wrap in 2 minutes, and then we could take more points later.
Excuse me for being long, but I would like to speak about two success actions, which was about the law of the project law of EMR, which mean the buildings at risk of collapse, which was a project of law very dangerous for the urban and rural landscape. The association has mobilized and launched a poster campaign, which this one on Facebook, and launched a petition and signing ceremony for the petition. In which many associations and schools of architecture, urban planning and heritage participated. This petition was filed in November 2018 at the Assembly of Representatives of the People. And the good news is that this project of law has been withdrawn for review on June 2020 after 2 years and a half of struggle. The second success, which deals on project of rehabilitation of the casino of Hamamlem, which is the last casino in Tunisia, in which we participated. We did scientific and artistic meetings around the landmark building, and we chose the casino of Hamamlem as support for the first meeting. The event was successful as we targeted on 100 people and we reached more than 500 visitors. Today, the casino is the subject of a call for rehabilitation launched by the City Council of Hamamlem, and it is thanks to this event that we are able to preserve the casino. To conclude, we continue to believe that the preservation passes first by the rise of awareness and the recognizing of history of this building. The reason why we continue to develop our site and seek collaborations and the partnership to continue the inventory that we already started in the European City of Tunis Center, as we see here. And I finish with the photo that gives me a lot of energy and faith in what we are doing. The best gift we received from the 6-year-old school children during our campaign to save the Hotel du Lac. Thank you for your attention. And excuse me to be so long.
Thank you. So we have not so much time left. There is a kind of statements, questions from the audience. And this is the chance now. Or from our speakers. George? Here, maybe you first.
Hello. So my question is directed to the presentation about Tunisian heritage. And I'm asking specifically about the district of Hammam Leaf. I think that there was a lot of, there were lots of buildings which were purposefully neglected as heritage because of the royal history of the base, and because post-independence Tunisia wanted to, eradicate that royal history or monarchical history of Tunisia. So it's basically an attempt at the erasure of a certain memory of the nation state. Are there other attempts? Because I saw only like an initiative to restore a casino, but I think it's a province with a much deeper, like it has a lot of houses, historic palaces, etc. So if you can elaborate more on that, please.
Maybe we take also the second question. I think it would be good not too much to get into a detail that we can kind of discuss in between the two of you. I think we would rather like to understand, have a more general understanding, but maybe a quick response and then to the second.
Yeah, so I have a general question, not the detailed. So thank you for the presentations. And one common theme that appears is the one of let's say, very often, unfortunately, failure of, campaigns and leading to demolitions. And time very often seem to be, like running against this, effort. Things happen very quickly, and raising awareness takes time, takes, like a lot of time. Doesn't mean that these efforts are vain. They will pay off. But it's sad to see that very often these efforts across the Middle East and my own home country as well, Morocco, are not successful. And I'm just saying to all of the teams to not give up, that you have to continue. And also from the example in Lebanon, let's say even when the battle is won, then how can we ensure that the rehabilitation would go according to certain norms? So having also certain legislation or conservation management plan or guidelines given to local authorities that very often, like what was said about Lebanon, do not have the knowledge nor the expertise. Often the architect themselves that are leading these rehabilitations do not have the expertise. So let's say this is the second challenge that I see ahead. Thank you very much and keep strong.
Thank you. I would like to answer Philip's question that he asked during the conversation, and maybe it's in line with what was said here by Aziza, because you asked Philip, how do people operate when there is no person in front of them to blame and to accuse of full responsibility of any missed opportunity or of any wrong decision taken by demolishing something that is important to the people. I think it's about tactics. I mean, if there is a lesson from today's session, is that there are many ways one could operate. Sometimes you operate on things that have to do with legal issues and so on. Sometimes you operate by doing one action that may make a difference in the place itself. Sometimes it's, as Belin suggested, it's bringing a lot of people to be concerned with the issue and not think only about that issue, because that issue is, or that building is just one aspect of a larger problem, which is that people have the right to memory, they have the right to belong to places. And Mohammed Gohar's very interesting presentation, I didn't know about that work, for me is a great way to, again, put all that we do in perspective. We are here and now, and we have to look at these things from here and now. Otherwise, you win the battle once and you lose 20 battles. So spreading information, disseminating information, making people responsible. And it is like, for example, when you want to, let's say, make a revolution in a way, look at what's happening in Lebanon today. There's no way we can get out of there because we have no dictator. We have a wrong system. Fighting a dictator is easier than fighting a system because the system has no face. It's something happening behind the scenes. So you have to act on the system. And in places you have to act against the law, against the preservation law that has a problem. You have to act for things rather than against things. By experience, most of the battles that were made against things were lost. But fighting for new things, I think can make the difference. That's my little idea on it.
I would have a general question, actually. I think I really liked how Sami Alou framed the discussion in making obvious kind of what narrative is dominant and what he thinks as in other narratives needs to be established. And I'm wondering if some of you, whoever would like, could say a few words. I mean, who is, I mean, we are all in these cases, we speak about conflicting heritage. Yeah, so this is heritage which is under discussion, and who is supporting your campaigning for this kind of appreciation of this heritage outside of our profession? I think, okay, so that there is some kind of architects joining in, fine, but I mean, who in the public with what kind of narratives is kind of teaming up with you?
Hello. Can I say something? Yes. We like in our experience, we had several moments when we actually saw those buildings being demolished in front of our eyes, and it's heartbreaking. But also, the more we look into, like, we tried several times to look into who is mobilizing this and why is it mobilized, like either from the, let's say, the political sphere or from the actual, you know, like the contracts that are being done. Like, for example, who's getting the contract to get this building be demolished? Like, for example, the Sawabir project was a huge project, and definitely there is a huge kind of money behind the demolition of that project. So it's surprising, as much as we are trying to reach out through the media, through actual, like, getting into the buildings and governmental entities to really understand why this is happening. It's very hard to grasp. It's like seeping from one entity to another and not really getting to the bottom of things. To me, I think the lack of communication between those entities is very, very vital. The idea, the lack of potential that they can imagine to any particular building to be preserved is key. So there's a gap between the public and constitutional vision, the institutional vision or the governmental vision, and the public demands and what they want, which is very kind of interesting. The protests that are political, they get a lot of attention, and they've been answered in a way, but the ones that are concerning the urban environment is still trying to reach out. Also, there's like this let's say separation between the municipal council and the parliament, which was kind of once one entity. It became kind of separate, and separating the human aspect or the human concerns from what is actually happening on the ground of construction and rebuilding the city. Thank you for that.
May I say something about it? I think the question of the heritage and the memory has two axes, actually. First of all, the question of heritage and memory is not peaceful in our countries. I mean, it's always a question of conflict. The former president Bourguiba wanted to erase the Beys and the king's heritage. The Ben Ali wanted to erase the modernist heritage of Bourguiba, and now the revolution wants to erase the heritage of Ben Ali, the Islamic traditional and Arabic heritage. And the other things is a question of money, actually. I mean, I think in the conscience of the people, of course, it's more expensive to try to rehabilitate an old building. So for them, it's very easy, as in their memory, it's easy to erase and to rebuild, and it's more economic to erase and rebuild again. There's this question. So I think the axis of the association that we are active in is interesting because we try to team up with the owners of the lands, of the hotel, of the casino, or whatever, to tell them, okay, we're gonna help you to make it less expensive than you think. We're gonna help you to reach some kind of architects. We're gonna help you to do the process, the administrative process to get the permit, the license to rehabilitate and to build. I think for your question, Philip, saying like, who are your teammates in that fight? I think, of course, the architects and the young. I mean, it's a question of generation, but we have to make the owners of this land, the owners of the buildings, our teammates, and not our enemies. So we have to help them to understand that it's very important to protect these buildings. But as they understand only the money language, if you want, we have to help them to save more money by helping them to reach other architects who can do it almost for free or something or whatever, or try to find funds or something like that. And of course, like the Goethe Institute or other Europeans and foreign institutions are helping us by deblocking some funds or something like that to help to save this heritage.
Thank you. And Safa, you have your hand raised.
Yes. So I would like to say that all I can tell you is that at the moment we think that first of all, general awareness is very important. We are currently preparing a big event within the association, to which we will invite all the parties involved in the urban landscape, ministries, funds, promoters, real estate, mayor, which aims to direct the real estate market toward rehabilitation rather than new construction, and involve everyone in this vision. It's so important to think big and think about a big vision, and which involves all persons who are concerned by the landscape, the urban landscape and the rural landscape.
Okay, thank you. And Dima also has.
I wanted to reflect on something that George said. It's who to blame always. In our case, it's the occupation, whether it is really direct or indirect. But in so many cases, it's really the whole political situation. For instance, what the Alami farm did, the founders now, like the Board of Trustees, they registered it as a foundation so that the Palestinian National Authority cannot really put its hand over the site, because they believe otherwise it'll be probably transformed into some sort of a resort or like a recreational place, because this has been the case in so many places in Jericho and elsewhere, unfortunately. So in the form of resistance, because if we don't do it, someone else will do it, someone else will take care of that, or the land will be confiscated. And this has been like going around for a while. So I think the people at Al-Alami farm currently, because it still functions as a dairy production farm, and they have other programs. They know very little about some people really know very little about the history, and because of our recent investigations, they revisited so many things, and they're actually rethinking what could be done with the facilities. But one of the things that they're doing now is that they rehabilitate the school. the vocational school, and they have a program that will be running soon. So they've already started taking action themselves. They're not architects, you know, they're just people who happen to work there and appreciate what's been done 50 years ago, more 70 years ago. So yeah.
So I have a question about the prospects of cross-border or international links between these different initiatives. And the reason why I ask is that I think larger international institutions fail here. I remember some years ago, I think 2015, I attended a discussion with the back then Director General of UNESCO, Irina Bokova, on the heritage in Syria. And I asked a question about the modernist architectural and artistic heritage. And she was completely baffled by the question and said that, well, we are not thinking about modern history. We are thinking about ancient heritage. And it was a bit surprising, but on the other hand, not so surprising. So I was just thinking, what about, cross-border cooperations? And I know it's a lot of work also, but do you have any ideas or any comments on that? Thank you.
We have Amin, and she kind of raised the hand in the, here on our panel. We have Sarah and Safa who raised the hand, and I think then we have to finish because we are over time.
Thank you everyone for fantastic presentations. My question is for Dima and Pelin. You raised a really interesting point, and it really struck me that the project that you're talking about is in such a specific context. Not that the rest of these contexts are not colonized or occupied, but we're talking about the Palestinian context, which is really unique. You're talking about a place that's kind of inaccessible to most of us, right? A place where the question of colonization is so present, and we know from the work of many scholars who have written about the role of heritage in the construction of the national identity of the colonizer, right? And it's kind of enforced, and it's so I kept thinking, you know, when you're presenting your work, what does it even mean to be doing this kind of research, let alone the question of heritage? Like, we're not even gonna get there anytime soon. But what does it mean to be doing this type of research? Because it strikes me what Dima said about the question of heist or the question of resistance. I think you alluded to, Pelin. What is it? Yeah, where does the research stand, you know, in such a fraught context? Thank you.
I think just to like, can I answer now, or is it someone else to? Okay, so I think the main or the focal point in this kind of research is how we can trace that kind of fleeting signs of resistance that were there in the starting kind of time of rebuilding or the urban renewal, because these moments of resistance, either the ones from theater and poems and poetry, these are very important to tell us more about kind of verbal gradual continuation of the city. The actual, the verbal, let's say, documentation tells us more about terms and terminologies that we use locally to describe our environment. These verbs are connected to the idea of communication, like kind of tied out to the idea of communication and how to communicate between entities, between people, and connecting and trying to kind of create a more inclusive landscape that connects the different nationalities that live in Kuwait.
Okay, thank you. Then I would take this question from the audience, and then we wrap up with Sarah, Safa, and the two of you.
Great. Thank you very much for all the presentations around activism for preservation. So every future has a past. And if the past is so contested, as in, I think, all cases here, I would like to think about also a form of intergenerational communication of what is there to be preserved, or what is it that we are acting for, as George said. Because I realized that a lot of people from a younger generation are exhausted of this type of history and sometimes don't see the need to preserve or reanimate, activate, preserve what there has been, and prefer to have kind of like a contemporary situation that they would like to be in. So my thinking or my question would be around the form of narrative or the form of activation that really picks up that younger generation to be aware of, wow, this is what we're holding within our history, and it's worthwhile to keep it alive, to, you know, reanimate it. Thank you.
I would like to pass the word to Sarah, but just one comment. My experience is just the opposite of what you just said. I think the generation is very engaged in, but Sarah.
Just to respond as well to the comment from the member of audience about this sort of intergenerational dialogue. I think it's Kuwait, for example, within the municipality or within the municipal council, within private sectors, are of sort of that older generation, and which is why it's so important to consider or to formalize this idea of mediation, which is what me and Dima are working towards with Medina. We consider ourselves as mediators, as an institution that is kind of not linked to any formal organization, even though we've been asked to sort of to fall under the National Council, and we sort of very, very adamantly refuse to do so. We prefer to be sort of this independent organization where we start to engage with students, we start to engage with the youth, who in the end are looking for places to gather, to work, to collectively sort of narrate the future of their city. And we find that this is very active, specifically in Kuwait. The youth is engaging on so many different levels. They're entrepreneurs, they open up their businesses, they're risk takers. So it's very, very interesting to see this happening on the ground. And you have to understand that the National Council, or most of these buildings that we've showcased are public buildings that have been demolished. And some of them, a few of them are private. The National Council engages with heritage at a certain level, and they consider sort of buildings that are pre-oil as having value, as opposed to buildings that fall within kind of the post-oil modern Kuwait. And so it's twofold. It's how do you give value to these buildings and consider them within the narrative of our national heritage, but also how do we attract the private investors who own buildings that fall within this period and have no incentive to restore them, to rehabilitate them, and they have no obligation legally to do so. And so as mediators, how can we also attract them? What Sami was talking about earlier, what are their incentives? And how can we attract young architects who are living in buildings that are prone to being demolished, but are worthy of, and they have value, their own private homes. We have so many wonderful private homes that are at risk of being removed because the value of the land, which is so inflated in Kuwait, goes beyond and over what for them they can get back, you know? So I think mediation for us is kind of very crucial here, mediating on different levels between entities, between generations, and really mobilizing the youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Safa. So next is Safa. Safa?
I think she rose her hand accidentally.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, I mean, for the question. I think it's very important because usually we're trapped, as yesterday, the discussion yesterday, you know, brought up questions pertaining to identity and stuff like that. So it really was a big discussion in the region, you know, Palestine, Jordan, the whole idea of the village, the nostalgic image of the village, and even in the art, the production of artworks of, you know, by Sliman Mansour and Nabil Anani, so many, they would go to villages and remove the modernist buildings, you know, the white buildings, because to them it was, you know, just part of this history that we wanted to maintain because of diaspora and, you know, the Nakba and stuff. So it's important nowadays to just find new narratives to tell, you know, to our students, to ourselves. Really, a lot of people are surprised with new knowledge because we've always been trapped in this whole rhetoric of identity, images that are always recurring. You know, this is how we relate. This is, you know, if you find some new buildings really in Ramallah, and even the Muqata'a, like the Taggart forts. This is another interesting story because, you know, the Palestinian National Authority, they celebrated sort of the legacy of Taggart by demolishing, you know, the history behind it and devoiding the content of, you know, of it being a prison and, you know, wiping out the blood of all the, you know, this of Palestinians, and then recreating images more with, you know, with arches, you know, typical stone. And so, yes, it is important for us to, you know, find new narratives to tell about, you know, a Palestinian philanthropist who started all of this. It wasn't, you know, superimposed from without. It wasn't, you know, sort of someone who had a vision. And also another thing, I remember when Philip came to Ramallah 2 years ago, we had an interesting discussion about the Bauhaus, you know, also that period characterized by the Bauhaus, you know, all these buildings, local Bauhaus, and, you know, sort of this discussion going around. So yes, we hope that we can take it to a whole different level now.
It's a bit different, my take, where the research stands. I'm not an architectural historian. I'm not even an art historian, although I have the diploma, but I'm more coming from sociology background. And I have more research focusing on the architectural sociology. But for me, Musa Alami is not a very original architectural structure. We have similar in the same period in Turkey as tools of supporting Kemalist nation state building, building the nation state with such agro-related modern architecture building and crafting ateliers, workshop, schools. We had many in Anatolia. So this was something to create and contribute the modern nation building of Turkey. So it's not a different, different example. I know such places, how they're functioning, how they have this civilizing, modernizing ideology behind that. I'm critical in that, but how I reached to Musa Alami was through my pedagogical research, because I was doing an alternative pedagogy practice research, and this is how I found the case. And I was teaching in Al-Quds, critical spatial practice. I teach generally, and I took the student there, Palestinian student from this region who never been there. There is one thing that this, how to create new meaning through pedagogy, through climate change, relation to climate change, to the land agriculture removal, landscape removal of Palestine, of everywhere, you know. This is one thing, and the last thing is, I want to say something, but I forgot because they're pressing me to stop, but yeah, oh, the food, discussing about the food, lunch,
were just mildly intimidating.
Yeah. So it was important for me to make the connection with the post-Anthropocene era. So the other thing what I want to say, we need to think also the local case of Jericho. I know that most of the people didn't visit Jericho, but Jericho is under very much neoliberal summer houses, gated communities booming, and it's becoming a kind of a summer high kind of upper class place, with the new apartments and new gated communities. So it's important also that Musa Alami farm, the settlement, is squeezed under this urbanization of Jericho. This is a local thing. It's important for Palestinian student, architects, and other students that we teach there, and so on. Yeah.
Just new modes of production, different modes of production, because it's important to go back to the, land, because the land it's all about the land, so reconnecting with the land, and even with the initiatives we showcased early on, they're all about, reconnecting because with the land, because it's, it's all where it all starts. You cultivate their knowledge.
Microphone? Oh, I just had a small comment to do about the comment you gave, Susanna, about younger generation maybe not being so interested into the preservation of buildings. I think in the case of Palestine, the Goethe Institute had a project which we did with Riwaq. It was preserving the Al-Hussein house. It's a house in Gaza, and we turned it into a cultural center right now. And I think there we really saw that the younger generation is actually very interested into preserving buildings, because especially in Palestine, we see that governmental sides usually want to build new buildings, cut down trees and bring up a new building, tearing down an identity of us. And I think in Palestine, it's a very different point, basically, that preserving cultural heritage, because it proves much more than just preserving this heritage. I think, so yes, and we saw when we were preserving the house, it was great how the community was really engaged in the preservation process and reconstructing this house. So it was really greatly accepted, and we were happy about seeing this engagement also from the civil society in Palestine. So yeah, but definitely it's very important to preserve instead of keep building new buildings. And I guess that was the last point.
Okay, thank you very much. A little bit over time, but now we wrap up until 2. So we can have some informal discussion as well. And at 2, we come back for a session renovation, modernizing, and updating. So see you then.